How many of you think that you are leaders? Let's see a show of hands. How many of you think you are leaders? Excellent, excellent. I hope to get an even greater number at the end of this conversation. Toastmasters, welcome guests. I would like to talk about what it is that makes leaders different from everybody else in the team. I believe it's their thinking. I believe that they think differently than everybody else. They have perspective. They understand a broader view. They have a vision of what is required in the end. And they do not get lost in the details. So I'm going to talk about people this evening from my own experience and from the experience of a lady called Zone, who furnished a CD that is in our library collection I'm returning tonight. She says that there are 7 traits of self-sabotage and sabotage of other employees that we engage in that keep us from becoming leaders. I'd like to talk about some of those in the order that she does. First, and I know such a person in my own team, we must avoid constant auditioning, always interviewing for the job we already have. We don't need to interview for it, we need to be it. The young lady I'm thinking of is a project manager of about 15 in the organization I work with, and every single meeting, every Tuesday, and it's an interminable one that goes on 2 hours, she helps it to be interminable by telling us once again how smart she is and how many things she knows. She marginalizes herself by doing this, and I discourage that kind of activity. You see it rarely, but in a person who has been a project manager for many years, it's a trait that is unlikely to ever make her the leader of a team. As a matter of fact, people avoid her. It's not something that you want to practice. The second trait of self-sabotage is something simply called being right. Having to be right all the time. A leader goes into the meeting perhaps with a point of view, but he leaves the meeting having made a decision about 80% of the time that is the right decision, and it isn't necessarily his or her own idea. It is the best idea that was brought forward by a team. So being right, having to be right, means that other people have to be wrong. And everyone in your team knows that someday you, who had to always be right, will have to make them wrong. Something to avoid. An act of self-sabotage and sabotage of the team. Being the company or organizational conscience is another thing to avoid. An act of sabotage of yourself and of the team. I had an experience with this myself. Several years ago, I worked for the Arabian American Oil Company, and a young lady came to me one day, and she said that it was a matter of conscience for her, that she really couldn't continue to work for an Arab company. And I said, what Arabs are you talking about? You know, we're here in Houston, Texas, and we're buying materials that are going to Saudi Arabia. She said, well, I just feel uncomfortable about it because, you know, and I said, you know what? She said, well, because I'm Jewish. And I said, ah, okay, well, I'm sorry you have to leave. You've been an excellent employee. Well, what I didn't know is that from that moment, she intended to sabotage the organization, literally. And everything she did for the next 2 weeks, she did purposefully wrong. So the next time someone tells me that they are the company conscience and that they simply couldn't do that in good conscience for the company, I will do something else, something very different from what I did the first time. I will terminate the person immediately, give them their 2-week severance, and get them out the door. Well, when you say things like that in your own organization, oh, I couldn't possibly do that in good conscience, you have described yourself to all the members of your team as the company conscience and a person of questionable merit. Blaming others. I couldn't get the job done, boss, because Bob and Carol wouldn't return my calls. Now that does not sound like an activity of a powerful person. So what do? You leave a voicemail message for Bob and Carol, and you say, if I don't hear from you by noon on Wednesday, I'll understand that you aren't available. And then you immediately go to two other people, strategic witnesses, people who can help you accomplish this task. And you say, if these other people don't help, would you be prepared to help? They say yes. Then you go to your boss and you say, I didn't hear from Bob and Carol. They seem to be too busy to help. However, I have the help of these other two people, and I believe your objective was to get the job done. I think they can help me get it done in the time available. Your boss is bound to say, of course, that's what you should do. The boss is busy. He doesn't want you to complicate his life. He wants solutions. He wants can-do sort of words. You don't blame others. It is possible to work until 2 o'clock in the morning. In fact, not have anybody know you're there because no one else is there with you. To work very, very hard, to have all the facts, to say, no, that wasn't a 3.1, that was 3.15. Well, those kinds of people who are focused on the task make excellent soldiers, but they do not make leaders. And what happens over time, especially if your car is towed away at 2 o'clock in the morning and you didn't know that that space really couldn't be used at that hour, is that you have isolated yourself. I had that conversation with my cousin Scott, who is not here because he's isolating himself this evening. He plans to work all night for a Senate session. It is not what people do who become leaders. They seek help, and they do not drown in work. And lastly, what do you do? Like the lady I mentioned at the beginning, you make yourself a target, a combination of all those items. I submit that all of you are leaders. Please, if you think that you can be a leader, raise your hand. Thank you.